Good Shabbos. This week we are coming to the end of Adar Aleph, the first month of Adar, and we're beginning Adar Beis, the second month of Adar, starting on Sunday. And as told to us by the rabbis, Mishenichnas Adar Marba B'Simcha. When Adar comes in, we should increase our joyfulness. So this week I want to dedicate my talk to the memory of my mother, Bashi Kerzner, who passed away 16 years ago. And her Yahrzeit was just yesterday on the 27th day of the first month of Adar. And I believe it's appropriate to the idea and the concept of simcha, of joyfulness, because one of the traits that my mother had was that she had a simcha sachayim, a joy of life, or a joy de vivre. And we are often told about the idea how it's important to constantly be besimcha, to be happy, to be joyful. Right? Rav Nachman of Breslev said, "Mitzvah gedola lios besimcha tamid." It's a great mitzvah to always be joyous. We're also told that we should be ivdu as Hashem besimcha. There's a verse. You should worship God, serve God with happiness. And the Torah also tells us that we'll be punished because you did not serve God with happiness or joyfulness and a full heart. So there's an emphasis on being joyous. But I believe it's different than sometimes often quoted idea of joyfulness that we find in society at large. And that is, don't worry, be happy. And I think that's not the Jewish approach. Don't worry, be happy is really saying, forget all your problems, forget all your cares. There was a famous song like that. Don't worry about anything. Just ignore the problems. Maybe take a drink. Just indulge yourself in happiness and forget the world around you. I believe that there's a possibility of having being worrisome, worrying about the future, worrying about who you are, what you're doing, and still be happy. How is that possible? So I would talk about some of the traits that I believe my mother had. She always had simcha. She always had joyfulness. She was always happy. She was always laughing. But she also had another trait, which was that she was always understanding of other people. She had insight into people. She really understood other people, and she cared very much about other people. She was also was very used to expressing what she said, what she thought. In other words, because she knew things, she expressed it in a respectful manner. She never said anything, I don't think, too much negative to other people. But especially with family members, we knew what she was thinking. She felt free to express herself. And I think that's all tied in with each other. There's an idea in the Torah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the Rambam Maimonides, who I like to quote, says that same, I believe he understands that the same ava that you're supposed to have, the same love you have for other people, is related to the mitzvah of ahavtas Hashem elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol miyadecha. You say in the Shema, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. And he says that the love that you have basically is tied to the knowledge of your head. You can only love God with the knowledge that you know him. And I believe that this is something which we could then take and say approaches the idea of love that you should have for whether it's a spouse, family, or your neighbors. And how do you understand that? Because when the Torah says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," you should love your neighbor as you love yourself, it's implied that you have to love yourself. People who don't love themselves cannot love other people. Why? I would suggest going with the same idea in Maimonides, because to love yourself, you have to have das, you have to have knowledge, you have to know yourself. You have to have confidence in who you are. You have to understand yourself. You have to know where you're going. It doesn't mean you shouldn't worry about yourself, but it means you know exactly who you are and sometimes your faults. And when you could therefore really love yourself because you know who you are, you appreciate what you have, what you stand for, and even the faults that you have, you could identify them and work with them. So you could worry, you should worry, but you could still be happy because you know who you are, you know which direction you're going. And when you know yourself and you understand yourself and you're confident in who you are, it's much easier to be objective about other people because it's no longer clouded by the lies that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And therefore, we start projecting all of our problems on other people. We see in other people what we want to see in order to make sure that we appear better, for example, than we really are, or different than we really are. But if you know yourself well, if you understand yourself, if you have insight, then you could have insight into other people. And I believe that was the midah, the character trait that my mother had. She was she wasn't somebody who didn't worry. She was concerned, she cared, she was devoutly religious, but she also had a simcha, she had a joyfulness because I think she was okay with who she was. And therefore, she was able to see other people and see them honestly. And therefore, not only see them and understand them, but care for them. Because deep down, that's what love is all about. Love is understanding ourselves and understanding our relationship to other people, whether it's family, community, and understanding the connection that we're supposed to have. As my grandmother, my mother's mother, used to say, we all call Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. All Jews, and it's really all human beings, are responsible one for another. In other words, we see ourselves as a community. We see ourselves as part of one large, happy family. And I think that's the midah, that's the character trait that I hopefully have learned from my mother, and that others in my family and others in the community at large, they saw that in my mother. And I believe that's the legacy she left behind. That it's not just happiness and laughing and just, partying. That's not what it's all about. It's being confident. It's being able to understand who you are, having that insight and taking it seriously. You could worry and still be happy. And hopefully that's what we have when we celebrate Purim also. We worried. Esther said you have to fast for 3 days before she goes into the king Achashverosh. They were very concerned. Mordechai was wearing sackcloth. But they knew they knew their purpose. As Mordechai told Esther, maybe that's the reason why you're now the queen and you're in the palace of the king of Persia, because you have a purpose, and therefore you could be happy. And therefore, that's exactly what Purim is all about. We celebrate, and we have to make sure that our celebration is not just unbridled drinking and just levity, but rather a joyfulness which is directed towards a higher level of spirituality, a closeness to God, an insight into ourselves, and it's something that hopefully will carry over for the rest of the year. Good Shabbos.